Hi, and welcome to Early Retirement Roadmap, the show where I help you prepare for and thrive in early retirement. If you're planning Roth conversions and early retirement, here is a mistake I think a lot of people make. They assume the Roth conversion window is bigger than it really is. On paper, it looks great. You retire, your income drops, then you slowly move money from pre-tax accounts into Roth accounts at relatively low tax rates. Simple. But once you start thinking through how this works in real life, that window can start shrinking fast. And as an early retiree myself, I can tell you this is one of those topics that sounds a lot easier from a distance than it does once you are actually living it. My wife and I have large balances in pre tax accounts, so this is not some abstract planning topic to me. It is something I think about a lot because I do not want to give the government more money than I need to. So when I think about Roth conversions, I am not just asking, should I do them or not? I'm thinking about how much tax I would have to pay up front, where that money would come from to pay those taxes, when the best years really are, how this affects Affordable Care Act or ACA premiums before Medicare, and later on, whether Medicare income related monthly adjustment amounts or IRMAA surcharges could become part of the equation too. And the more I've thought about it, the more I have realized there is a lot more to this than the usual simple advice makes it sound. Because a lot of people picture this long stretch after retiring where income is low, taxes are favorable, and they can calmly convert money from pre-tax accounts into Roth accounts year after year. But real life usually does not work that neatly. Your spending may be higher than expected. A spouse may still be working. Estate planning may limit how much income you want to show before Medicare, so you are not paying full premiums. You may decide to start taking Social Security earlier than you originally thought. IRMAA can show up later, and if you wait too long to think about it, some of your best years may already be gone. So, this episode is not about whether Roth conversions can be useful. They absolutely can. This is about 5 reasons why the opportunity is often narrower, shorter, and messier than people realize. Because I think a lot of early retirees are overestimating how much room they really have. And if you get this wrong, you can end up doing too little, doing too much, or doing conversions in years that are a lot less attractive than you thought. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say someone retires at 60 and thinks they have this huge runway to do Roth conversions before required minimum distributions or RMDs begin at age 75. On paper, that can look great, but then real life shows up. Maybe their spouse keeps working for a few more years. Maybe they need more income from the portfolio than they expected. Maybe they are on an ACA plan and do not want to push income too high so they don't lose subsidies. Maybe they start Social Security sooner than they originally thought. That wide open window they thought they had can start shrinking in a hurry. And that is really the point of this episode. Not that Roth conversions are bad, just that the version people picture in their heads is often not the version they actually get. All right, before we get into the 5 reasons, please remember that this podcast is not personalized financial advice and is for educational purposes only. Now, the first of the 5 reasons the Roth conversion can be smaller than people think is that your low income years may not be as low or as long as you expected. Most think you stop working, your paycheck disappears, your taxable income drops. Now you have this nice big opportunity to do Roth conversions. But that is not always how it plays out. Maybe you retire later than planned. Maybe your spouse is still earning income. Maybe you have rental income, interests, dividends, capital gains, part-time work, or just higher spending needs than you expected. So instead of having 10 or 12 beautiful low-income years, maybe only a few of them are truly favorable conversion years. For example, maybe someone thought they were going to retire at 58, but they actually retire at 61. Then maybe their spouse keeps working for a few more years. Maybe they also have rental income or some consulting income on the side. All of a sudden, the big low income gap they thought they would have is not 10 or 12 years anymore. Maybe it's only 3 or 4. This matters a lot because the whole point of a Roth conversion is not just to move money from one account to another. The point is to pay tax at a rate you can live with now to potentially avoid paying higher taxes later. And if the years are not as low income as you assumed, the math may not be nearly as compelling as the generic advice makes it sound. So I think the first planning mistake people make is assuming retirement automatically creates this giant tax planning window. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it creates a much smaller opening than people expected. The second reason the Roth conversion window is often smaller than people think is ACA planning before Medicare. And if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you probably knew I was going to bring this up because for early retirees, this is one of the biggest real world constraints. A Roth conversion creates ordinary income. So even if a conversion looks smart from a long-term tax standpoint, it can still affect what happens with your health insurance in the years before Medicare. That does not automatically mean you should not do the conversion. It just means the common advice to convert as much as you can in early retirement can be way too simplistic. Here's a simple example. Let's say you have a retired couple living partly off a taxable brokerage account and partly off pre-tax accounts. Now, they are being strategic. They are pulling spending money from the taxable brokerage account where only the long-term capital gain portion counts toward income for tax and MAGI purposes, not the full amount they withdraw. And maybe they're taking a smaller amount from a 401k or IRA too. That keeps their modified adjusted gross income or MAGI low enough that they qualify for strong ACA subsidies. Maybe they are on a bronze plan and paying very little each month for premiums. Now, let's say they decide to do a Roth conversion on top of that to fill up their current tax bracket, which is the common advice you'll hear. That conversion adds ordinary income, and if it pushes their MAGI high enough, they could lose a big chunk, if not all of those subsidies. For 2026, for a couple in the contiguous United States, 400% of the federal poverty level, or FPL, is $84,600. If their MAGI goes over that, even by just $1, they could be looking at full price premiums on that same bronze plan. That can easily mean thousands of dollars more per year, and in some cases, $20,000 or more. So now the question is not just, will this Roth conversion help me save on taxes later? The question is filling up more of my current tax bracket really worth blowing up my health insurance premiums this year? And for a lot of people, the answer may be no. They could lose more money from the higher health insurance premiums than they save in future taxes by doing the Roth conversion. That is another reason I think this topic gets oversimplified so often, because the answer is not just about taxes. It's also about what you're optimizing for. If your top priority is keeping ACA premiums lower, that may reduce how much room you want to use for conversions. If your top priority is reducing future taxes or future RMD pressure, no matter what, you may decide to convert more aggressively and accept the trade-off. But either way, this is not an unlimited window of time, and it's a window full of trade-offs. And I think that is a much more honest way to talk and think about it. The third reason the window shrinks faster than people think is Social Security. That's a big one. A lot of people mentally count the years from when retirement begins until RMDs begin and assume that whole stretch is available for Roth conversions. But for many people, that is not the cleanest way to think about it, because once Social Security starts, it can reduce how much room you have left for Roth conversions. And that means the best conversion years may end sooner than you expected. So if somebody retires and thinks, great, I have all these years to do Roth conversions, but then they claim Social Security fairly early, that window may have just gotten tighter. For example, if someone retires at 60 this year and they mentally count 15 years before RMDs begin at age 75 and assume all of that time is available, but if Social Security starts at 62 or 63, the cleanest part of that window may have only been a couple of years. And once Social Security starts, it can reduce how much room they have left for Roth conversions and can cause more of those benefits to become taxable as other income rises. That is a very different situation than the one they pictured when they first heard the generic Roth conversion advice. This is one of the reasons retirement planning decisions do not really work in isolation. Your Social Security decision affects your tax planning. Your tax planning affects your withdrawal strategy. And your withdrawal strategy affects how much flexibility you really have. That is why I think the better question is not just, should I do Roth conversions? The better question is, how many truly good years do I actually have before other income sources start taking more of that room? The fourth reason the window can close faster than people expect is IRMAA later on. A lot of people think of Roth conversions mainly as a pre-Medicare topic, but the Medicare years matter too, because if your income gets high enough, your Medicare premiums can go up. And one of the tricky things about IRMAA is that there's a look back period of 2 years. So decisions you make earlier can affect what you end up paying later. Here's a simple example. Let's say a couple retires at 63. They are finally in a lower tax bracket, so they decide to do a fairly large Roth conversion. And in that moment, it feels like they are still safely in the pre-Medicare years, so they are mainly thinking about taxes. But then they turn 65 and go on Medicare. Now, Medicare looks back at that earlier income, and the conversion they did at 63 can help determine whether they end up paying higher premiums because of IRMAA. So the surprise is not just the surcharge itself. The surprise is that they made the decision before Medicare, but the costs can show up once Medicare begins. That is the kind of thing people miss when they picture one big clean Roth conversion window. This does not mean you should never do Roth conversions in or around those years. Sometimes paying a temporary surcharge can still be worth it if the long-term benefit is strong enough. But it does mean that the window may start narrowing before people realize it. ACA can narrow one part of the window, Social Security can narrow another part, and IRMAA can narrow yet another part. The fifth reason the Roth conversion window is smaller than people think is that a lot of people quietly lose their best years by simply doing nothing. This one may be the biggest mistake of all because most retirees do not make some formal decision to avoid Roth conversions. It just kind of happens. Perhaps because the first year of retirement is a big adjustment. Then the second year gets busy. Then the market goes up and they think that we'll look at it later. Then they're closer to Social Security. Then they're closer to Medicare. And suddenly the years that would have been the easiest and cleanest are behind them. That is one of the reasons I wanted to make this podcast episode, because I think some people assume they can figure this out later when later may be the exact problem. The window is not just smaller because of tax rules. It's also smaller because life moves faster than you expect. Now, one thing that can make a Roth conversion more attractive is if the market is down. Why? Because a market decline can give you the chance to move more shares into the Roth for the same tax cost. And that can be a very attractive setup. Here's a simple example. Let's say you own a mutual fund or exchange traded fund or ETF in a traditional IRA, and you were already planning to convert $50,000 this year. If that investment is trading at $100 a share, a $50,000 Roth conversion moves 500 shares into the Roth. But if the market drops and that same investment falls to 80 a share, that same $50,000 conversion now moves 625 shares into the Roth instead. So you're still paying taxes on a $50,000 conversion either way. But in the down market version, more shares make it into the Roth. And if those shares later recover inside the Roth account, that rebound is happening in the tax-free account instead of the pre-tax account. That does not mean market drops are fun, but it does mean a bad market can actually create opportunity if you already know what you're trying to accomplish. There is also one more piece here that I think really matters. A Roth conversion is usually more powerful when you have outside money available to pay the tax bill. Ideally, that's cash. A taxable brokerage account can also work, but that can create capital gains and add another layer of income planning, especially if you're also trying to manage ACA subsidies. For example, if someone converts 50,000 but has to use part of that same conversion to cover the tax bill, then less money actually makes it into the Roth to grow tax-free. But if that same person has outside cash available to pay the tax, the full 50,000 gets into the Roth. That may not sound dramatic in 1 year, but over time that difference can matter. And that gets back to a bigger point. Roth conversions tend to work best when they are part of a bigger plan. They work better when you know what your spending actually is. They work better when you understand how ACA fits in. They work better when you have thought through when Social Security may start. They work better when you know whether IRMAA is likely to matter later. And they work better when you are coordinating the whole retirement picture instead of looking at one tactic in isolation. So if I had to boil this whole episode down, it would be this. The Roth conversion window is often not one big open runway. It's usually a much shorter stretch between competing priorities. You may have some low-income years, but maybe not as many as you thought. You may have room to convert, but maybe not as much as you thought. You may still want to do Roth conversions, but maybe not as aggressively and probably more strategically than the usual generic advice suggests. And that is why I think the real question is not, are Roth conversions good? The real question is, how much room do I actually have in which years, and what am I giving up if I use it? That is the kind of question that leads to better decisions, because the goal is not to blindly do Roth conversions. The goal is to use them when they genuinely improve your retirement plan. And for a lot of people, that starts with realizing the window may be smaller than they thought. Before we go, I want to share some freebies that are available on my Patreon, and the link is in the description or show notes. You can join for free and download these from my tools library. First, you can download my 12-step early retirement planning checklist, a practical, easy-to-follow guide that walks you through everything from calculating your FIRE number to building a tax-efficient withdrawal strategy. Second, if you're on an ACA health plan or are planning to be, if and when you retire, download my ebook, ACA Premium Shock Fix, 10 Ways to Pay Less for Marketplace Coverage All Year Long. This ebook gives you a clear, practical framework to lower your ACA premiums legally by understanding and controlling the income number that drives your subsidy, MAGI, or modified adjusted gross income. And lastly, download my ACA MAGI Estimator. It's an Excel template that can be used to estimate your MAGI for ACA health insurance. And you can also use it to keep track of your MAGI if you're currently on ACA health insurance to help stay within the 400% FPL threshold to maintain subsidies. And if you're interested in more help and while you're on my Patreon taking advantage of the free downloads, you may want to consider joining. I have 3 different levels to meet your budget and needs. The first level is access to the additional tools I've created. The second level gives access to those, plus ad-free and early access to podcast episodes before they're released to the public. And the final level gives you access to directly ask your retirement questions to me. Lastly, go to mikeupland.com for all of my media in one place. Until next time, thanks for listening. Take care and make the most of today.